Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Volato. Tonight we're here to recap the Giants' day 2 of the 2024 NFL Draft. It was an interesting one, Nick. At the beginning of day 2, I liked how it started. 2 receivers off the board, early trade-ups. Then there was some panic in my group chats, my Giants fans group chat. Specifically, I'm shouting out Ron and Matt Schneier, who had a lot of panic, and they were talking already about how they were done with Joe Shane. It recovered because I think despite the fact that we had that run, Nick, of a lot of the IDLs we wanted, a couple of the interior offensive line we wanted, a lot, let's be frank, of the corners we wanted. And we don't know. Like, let's be honest, we don't know if the Giants would have taken Nubin over Kool-Aid or Nubin over somebody, DeGene, or some of these corners that went before the Giants pick. But it was looking kind of dire at that time as we saw all the players we wanted, the positions of need, come off the board. But I really feel like the Giants did a really excellent job of recovering here. And it's not just like I can sit here and say that. I think if you look at just how some of the people we respect the most in this community view some of these picks, Dalen Jeremiah had these two prospects, number 51 and number 52 overall on his big board. The Giants got them at 47 and 70. Dane Brugler had Andru Phillips as one of his favorite players in the entire class. PFF's Trevor Sycamore, we've had on the show, had Nubin as 31st ranked player on the entire big board. It's not like the Giants just sat there, panicked, and reached for players. I feel like they fit needs. And quite frankly, they fit their scheme really well. That's what I think with both of these picks. They fit a combination of two things. The scheme fit that they're bringing in with Shane Bowen. And we knew, Nick, like going into this thing, like they drafted a lot of defensive backs to fit Wink Martindale. Obviously, they were going to want to try to bring in guys to fit Shane Bowen because the system was so different. What they're going to be asking so different. But in addition to that, I like that both these corners have the same trait, that fightiness, that competitiveness. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today, but this was really all about the secondary tonight, Nick. The Giants went out tonight and revamped their secondary. We knew it was the weakest position group they had on paper. We thought maybe, they'll try to get some, but they might try to get interior offensive linemen or defensive linemen too, some trench guys, because, they might rely on their pass rush to help their secondary. But it's clear tonight their goal, at least based on the value and how things felt to them, was to revamp their secondary. And I think they added two players who have a really good chance of playing a lot of snaps this year.
We knew that the Giants were going to look into the secondary. We thought maybe it might be Max Melton. I still think Max Melton was going to be the pick in the second round if the Giants had an opportunity to select him. I was talking to somebody on Twitter about this. The Giants are looking for these defensive backs, these cornerbacks who can plant and drive immediately and get downhill. That's exactly what Andru Phillips is. Andru Phillips has all the athletic traits you want in a cornerback. He can play man. He can play zone coverage. He's very fluid, man. And I absolutely love – it's not that his footwork is precise. He doesn't have like the best footwork, but he is such a good athlete, and his hips are so oily that he doesn't necessarily need to have the most precise footwork. So if he does smooth out, I guess, some of the inefficiency with some of his footwork, his ceiling is just going to rise, right? And this is somebody who jumped like 42 inches 42, or something in a vertical jump. He has we'll get into the traits a little bit more just as we go through the show. But Tyler Nubin too, man. I've been talking about Tyler Nubin for a while. I'm a big fan of Tyler Nubin. He's a little bit stiffer. He doesn't have the oily hips that Andru Phillips has, but he's just so damn smart. The instincts go through the roof, and you can see how he baits quarterbacks and how he's able to read backside routes and the spatial awareness of just knowing where he is on the field, knowing where the offensive concepts are being ran to, and how he's able to react to what the offense is trying to do. Those are all things that Shane Bowen is going to leverage. Those are all things that the New York Giants absolutely needed in their secondary. I don't know. Do we give grades for this, Dan? Do we give grades for day two?
We never really do
that.
Yeah, I think I'm okay not giving grades this early in the process, right? It's up to you.
Well, of course, grades are stupid, but we do comps, and they're kind of stupid as well. So I was just like,
I think the comps are I've made my case for why comps are less stupid. Yes. Comps are less stupid to me because I think a lot of people don't have time to watch the film or study these players.
It's more of grades that just of how you're feeling right now.
Okay.
Based off what they did.
Okay. You know? I like that. I'm feeling we'll get into it when we talk more about the players. I have a really strong gut feel about Andru Phillips. I have a very strong gut feel just based on character, some of the things I've read, and just who he is and the explosiveness. I have a really good feel there. So I'm going to say that one early feel for me is A, honestly, A- maybe. Nubin, I'm going to go B. I still like Nubin. And I think overall, I talked about this, on yesterday's podcast or one of the podcasts in the past few days. I've learned since like the draft where I loved Ashton Davis, I'm done overrating speed and range at the safety position. It just doesn't come into play a lot. Like Ed Reed, you think about those types of safeties. It's cool. It's fun. But today's NFL is just not played in the deep half that often. And yeah, they're going to have some sick highlight plays, but what I'd rather have is instincts at that position. I think instincts can make up for a lot of deep speed that you might be losing with a player like Tyler Nubin, who I don't think has the best deep speed. And it was interesting to me. So I'll go maybe B and A on that. And I want to get your feel. But one thing I thought was interesting about today's, before we get into that, one thing I thought was interesting about today's picks, it was a little bit of a change in the norm from like some of the athleticism that they had preached. And I really think these guys are athletic, especially Andru Phillips specifically, more so than Nubin. But like, from speed standpoint, I just think we're seeing something different in what they're looking for in the secondary. Like we talked a lot about, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now. It's been such a long weekend. The 6th round corner we took last year,
Trey Hawkins,
and the traits he had and the size and the speed. And like maybe for Wink system, that was something they were going to try to build on. But I think for this system, they're looking for different traits. You talked about one of them at the top of the show, that ability to click and close and drive downhill. And I think these two corners have that trait and instincts and things that you're looking for at that position: competitiveness, feistiness. And that's going to be the new theme of what Shane Bowen and the secondary is molded and revamped around. So I like that they're doing things. Look, everyone knows that when you hire a coach, like you can say you're drafting for best player available or whatever. You do draft for what these coordinators want and these position coaches want. Anyone who doesn't believe that, just go back to the NFL Network broadcast and look at Jerome Henderson, Giants defensive backs coach, reaction when they picked Andru Phillips. That was a guy he loved, and he loved him because of how he thinks he can teach him and what he can mold him into, in addition to what Shane Bowen told him he wants for his system, the type of corner he wants. So I think it's a bit of a change in what they're looking for in the second year, but it's a welcome fit for me. And I overall, like I'm good kind of focusing on different kinds of traits for this position. Because let's be frank, like we haven't really hit. I like Deontay Banks, but we haven't really slam dunk hit on Trey Hawkins or Cordell Flott just yet.
Yeah, Cordell Flott was a little bit of a reach, though, in the 3rd round. And we were saying that at the time. I know you were a big fan of Cordell Flott.
Also still young, by the way.
3rd round, still young. Yeah. Yes. Trey Hawkins, the 3rd. I love his physicality. I thought, yeah, absolutely, you make that selection in the 6th round, but it's still a 6th round pick. Andru Phillips is a 3rd round pick. This is pick 70. I think there is an immense ceiling with Andru Phillips because all the coverage skills that I mentioned before, I absolutely love the feistiness that you brought up, the competitive toughness, and you could see it. He's chirping, but damn, man, he has no idea what he's doing at the catch point. And he had no
ball production.
He had no ball production. He had no interceptions, and you can see it too. He's jumping early. He's misjudging his jumps. Can that be developed? Is that a natural thing? That's I guess that can be determined. It's probably by a case-by-case basis. That's an aspect of his game that is problematic, though. And I'm not certain if Andru Phillips is going to start in year 1. I think Cordell Flott could win that job still because he is young and because he is a little bit more experienced. But if you're just saying who has the best man coverage skill on this roster right now behind Deontay Banks, it's Andru Phillips, I think, unless we could see something from Cordell Flott. Andru Phillips, I'm telling you, man, takes wrong steps still. He can put himself right back into phase. And if you have that baseline of those athletic traits, then that's just an excellent foundation to possess. And hopefully you can develop some sort of skill set to learn how to come away with some interceptions, because that would be really damn nice, but the range and getting back into phase and all of that, there were some coverage lapses. I wish he was, look, the way I phrased Andru Phillips is he plays too fast. Like he's a little bit out of control. But it's a blessing and it's a curse, because it's a blessing that he can play that fast, because not a lot of cornerbacks can play as fast as he can play because they just don't have that type of athleticism. But he just doesn't know how to yet harness that speed and that athletic ability. And once he comes to harness that and comes to control that, I think maybe we will really start to see, hey, this was pick 70, but he's playing like he was pick 40, or he's playing like he was a 1st round guy. And that's the hope for Andru Phillips. He's still only 22 years old, about 6 foot, 185 pounds, not the biggest guy, but he does play like he's big. Yeah, just wish he was a little bit more controlled, because he can get out of control. And Xavier Legette got him pretty well against South Carolina.
That's a bad game for him. Yeah. And I know people have talked about, and that's fine. And, like that was also, I remember at least listening to Chandler Jeremiah talk about A.D. Mitchell and how well he did against Kool-Aid McKinstry. I know people do look for that, like those big matchup type games and profiles, and I understand that. But I think there's some developmental traits here as you went over the physicality, the feistiness. I think both these DBs can help you in the run game and will help you in the run game. I know you mentioned that he might not play in year one, Andrew Phillips. I think that's possible. Joe
I said he
Shane
won't start.
Start. Yeah. I didn't mean play. Sorry. Start in year one. And that's definitely possible. I do think Nubin's going to play like 95% of the snaps in year one
Yes.
right away. Like, I think it's going to be just one of those situations. But I wouldn't be shocked if Phillips does work his way into a role because I think both these guys can help them in the run game. And I do think that, at least from what Joe Shane said, he's going to have a chance to compete to be their slot early. But he did say he might work on the outside too, but he has a chance. And they're going to have Flott actually kick back out to the outside. Maybe Flott does find his fit in this system. I've always felt like Flott would be better maybe in an off coverage system. I have one comment I did want to make about and it's fine because I do think you're right about the tape backs it up. And this is not a high point of his game. But as far as like the no interception stat goes, he did only have 22 snaps in 2021 and only 300 total in 2022. So only like under 400 snaps in his first 2 years. Really, it was until 2023 where he finally got a real role where he had almost 700 snaps in 2023. So it is part of the profile, but even with that, like he only had 6 forced incompletions according to Pro Football Focus Advanced Stats in 2023. Just taking out the seasons where he didn't play a lot of snaps, that's still just 272nd of all corners in the 2023 season. So this is clearly not a high point of his game right now, at least.
No, not right now. And I'll bring up on the screen my evaluation of his strengths and his weaknesses. And I hope you guys can read this on the screen at this point. I'll just like scroll up and down. But
sure.
Again, man, I've already said it so many times. It's the explosiveness is what I'm looking for. It's what Shane Bowen is looking for. That's why they were into Max Melton. That's why they didn't want to go with a Kamari Lassiter or a TJ Tampa or a player of that ilk, right? They wanted to get somebody who can play soft, who can play off, and who can quickly react downhill on the quick passing concepts. And that's what Andru Phillips is going to provide to them. And I absolutely love, and I have it written down here, he's physically minded, right? He wants to run through you. And there are times where he is just going underneath ball carriers, then flipping them and helicoptering them over the top of him. Like he has that type of mentality. And what does Joe Shane and Brian Dable preach? Smart, tough, dependable. Andru Phillips is tough as hell, man. He's going to let you know it as well. Now you're going to have him and Deonte Banks back there, hopefully for the future. And another interesting thing too, man, is Phillips can play in the slot. He had 223 snaps in the slot last year. He aligns in the box a little bit. You're not going to necessarily see that all too often unless it's like quarter package that we used to see back in 2022. But he has that at least flexibility and that versatility, that option. So if Cordell Flott ends up being a better nickel, you can kick Andru Phillips outside or maybe Andru Phillips inside. Just gives you more options, more options for Jerome Henderson to work with.
Yeah, I like that call by you a lot because giving versatility for Henderson is a big thing. I just like the idea of giving Henderson 2 guys to work with right now. This is one of the position coaches we have for the Giants that we trust the most, Nick. I know you feel this way, and I think it's one of our best position coaches. He's proven it. We've taken guys like Fabian Moreau and got a lot of production out of him, Nick McLeod. Even, at times I feel like the work he did with Jason Pinnock is really phenomenal. I'm pretty high on where Pinnock's going to be going into this year. So I like that a lot. Well, let's stick right now with Phillips, and we're going to actually circle back to Nubin. I know we kind of went out of order here. We did the 3rd round pick before the 2nd round pick, but instead of bouncing back, I'll say this about Phillips. He is a player, Nick, where I hope the draft nicks and the scouts are right on him because there's a really high feeling about him with those guys. For example, I mentioned earlier, Daniel Jeremiah had him as his 52nd best player on his entire big board. Dane Brugler said he's one of his favorite players in the entire draft class. He compared him to Roger McCreary, another player who not only Shane Bowen drafted during his time in the Titans, but remember, the Giants were rumored to be in on McCreary, and a lot of people feel like they only traded back that draft. It was the draft they took Wan'Dale. They only traded back a couple times because McCreary was snagged right before them. I believe, did the Titans trade up or were they just on the board? I think they might have traded up, right?
I'm pretty sure they traded up.
Yeah.
That was the first pick in the 2nd round.
First pick in the 2nd round. And,
yeah,
he's drawn a lot of comps. And then I read Greg Cosell's scouting board, a guy, we love, the godfather of film, essentially. And he also compared him to Roger McCreary and really liked his film a lot as well. So now there's multiple guys who like his film. Then you go to, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, who said he had several scouts tell him Phillips was the best interview they conducted pre-draft of the entire class. He's an incredibly heady player. We know the Giants like that. Bruce Feldman says multiple scouts were big fans of him that he talked to. One scout even said he's got some of the best change of direction in the entire class at the cornerback position. And obviously the athletic testing was phenomenal. Really smart player who can play nickel for you right away, according to this scout. So just one of those players who a lot of scouts, draft nicks are really high on. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out, but that's at least in play right now, that he is, very high on a lot of people's boards, including the scouts who do this for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I made my point on Andru Phillips at this stage. I think there's a lot of room for development, and I think that ceiling is really high. So you bring him in and you hope that Jerome Henderson can develop him. Has Jerome Henderson developed any rookies though at the cornerback position?
I think we can fairly say, I mean, it depends how you look at it, but I thought he did a pretty good job with Deontay Banks last year.
But Deontay Banks was a stud coming
right,
in.
He didn't really need to develop. I know what you're saying, like guys who are just under the radar type picks.
Just the only reason why I voice that, I'm not saying he can't do that, right? I know Duabero was saying this on Twitter, and I thought it was an interesting point by Jake, I believe his name is, right? I thought it was an interesting point because you look at Trey Hawkins, that's a 6th round pick. What are you going to do? Darnay Holmes was a young player that he inherited, and we didn't really get a lot out of him either. And a lot of the players that we praised Jerome Henderson for, and I think rightfully so, they were all a little bit more seasoned.
Good point. Yeah.
They were a little bit more seasoned. The only reason why I bring this up is because I do believe Andru Phillips is still very raw. And there are still aspects of his game where he's a little bit undisciplined, where he gets shaded off of his spot, maybe when he could have been a little bit more patient and his hips get turned. But again, he's so damn fluid that he can just turn himself back around. But in the NFL, that's going to put you in the spots that are disadvantageous and it could be exploited. But if you can iron out those inefficiencies, then that's where I feel like that ceiling can manifest. I just don't know if we've seen that yet from Jerome Henderson with a young player.
That's a fair point. Good point by Duabaro, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think about it, and we mentioned those kind of like, what do you call them? Like just like free agent fines, I guess you could say, from Joe Schoen. And maybe the credit belongs more with Joe Schoen in that regard than the D-back coach developing these players because they were older in their career. Something to consider.
It's not like a shot at Jerome at all. It's just more so this is a kid who we feel like has a ceiling. Let's actually get to that ceiling because it didn't necessarily work with Cordell Flott quite yet. Still very young player. Don't want to rule it out. It's only 2 years in the NFL, but we haven't really. Have you? What are your thoughts on Flott right now? Like, going into this season, we're not like, oh, we're excited about this. We're like, yo, man, if you don't show us anything more, then homeboy, you might be out of a job kind of thing.
Well, I will say this about Flott. He's 22 years old, which is crazy. He's so young. Like some of these guys that people are drafting right now are like 24 years old. John Michael Schmitz was like 24 years old and the Giants drafted him. And I just feel like, and you could tell me if you disagree with this, this is just my feeling from my memory of Flott when he came out, why I liked him so much. In my mind, I've always felt like he's going to be a better off coverage type of corner, just the way his body is and the way he is. And I just think this system might be that click moment for him at 22 years old, where everything works in his favor. He gets the right system fit. He was never really fit for press man and what Wink wanted to do. I remember even some of the reps he lost, like last year and the year before, like early in his career, you'd see him like that red zone rep he lost, like, I was thinking about that rep, and it's like, that's not what I really want Flott doing. That's not how I think you maximize his skill set as a longer athlete who kind of, in my mind, had some moments at LSU where he had good click and close. That's why I liked him. I'd like to see him in off coverage. So I'm more cautiously optimistic about him than I would be if we were just going back into this year with Wink Martindale. I'll say that for sure.
I'll say this. I'm just glad that the Giants paid attention to the secondary because we know they needed to. Like, you brought in Brian Burns. You have this pass rush. I still think you need to add an interior defensive lineman, but you needed to pour some assets into that secondary and have them compete. I think you're spot on, Dan. We're going to see a lot of Tyler Nubin, rightfully so. Kid is wildly intelligent. We'll get into him in a little bit. And I'm hoping by week 4 or even in training camp, which would be ideal, we see Andru Phillips seize the starting role opposite of Deontay Banks. I just know that it might be a little bit of a bumpy ride. I am very excited, though, about this kid's ceiling.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm almost thinking him more like the likelier scenarios he starts in the slot this year, but I could see him on the outside, too. That's where he played last year.
And that's the thing about him in the slot that I absolutely love for all the athletic traits that we were talking about. Like, you give a wide receiver two-way go. It's so difficult for these defenders, especially with the Bulls, to guard those guys. And he actually has the explosiveness in and out of his breaks and the ability to change direction very swiftly and on a dime to at least put himself back into phase. And dude, he had who was it against? Was it against I don't exactly remember. It might have been against it was against an orange team. I remember there's this horizontal cross that he actually got a PBU on where it was from the slide. He just attached to the hip and it was really good technique, which gives me hope that there is ball skills there. It's just he hasn't come down with those interceptions yet. Although there are several plays, and I'm going to do a video on him eventually. There are several plays on his tape where he's like misjudging the jump and it's just like, oh man, and he's getting mossed and you're like, bro, come on, you got to be better than this because we can't allow these athletic traits to go to waste.
Yeah, I mean, the movement skills, the change of direction, the toughness. I feel like, when that's the thing with both these guys. They're super tough players with physical, tough, competitive guys. Like I've always heard like that feistiness and that competitiveness and that confidence is what you need out of the corner and any of the D-back positions. And this dude is very, very confident. The way I heard, I was listening to his interview or reading his interview with the Giants after the draft. And he said, in the grand scheme of thing, everybody knows I'm sticky. In coverage, I'm sticky. I'm going to get the ball off, dudes. I'm going to do my job on the back end. They understand who I am when I was coming in. I'm going to catch no type of balls in that type of sense, whatever that means. I'm just going to try to get the balls off guys. And just the way he talked, man, like for most positions, I'd be like, oh, you're cocky, you're overconfident. I don't know if I love this, but for that position, you need it. There's no other way. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about the corner position. And I love that he, had some like, yes, the ball production wasn't there, but according to Pro Football Focus, he had a career best 23 defensive stops in 2023, was the most among SEC cornerbacks. He also had the 11th most snaps of any corner in college football in zone coverage last year, which is important, I think, as we move forward to what we're going to be doing here with Shane Bowen and the system here. And I love, Nick, that he talked about the battle that's upcoming with Wan'Dale Robinson, because it's going to be fun watching those two go at it. If Phillips does start and stay in the slot, as Joe Shane said, he's going to start there. We don't know if he's going to stay there. Let's say he stays there, at least for the beginning of camp. It's going to match up with Wan'Dale Robinson a lot. And those two played against and matched up against each other in college. And he said in the interview that Wan'Dale called him immediately after the pick and they're talking trash to each other. And he's like, we've been talking trash to each other. So I know that's going to be a fun storyline just as fans to follow. Just a good, fun one there.
Absolutely. And Jalin Hyatt, I went back into my archives and I found plays that I cut up from Jalin Hyatt when the Giants drafted him. And he was actually going up against Andru Phillips in the slot. And it just made me so much more excited about Jalin Hyatt too. And Andru Phillips didn't do anything wrong. It was just Andru Phillips was playing, it was slightly inside leverage off. And Jalin Hyatt just turned on the jets. He was running a curl route, about a 12 to 15-yard curl route, and he sold his vertical stem so well that Andru Phillips flipped his hips and started just running. And then right as Andru Phillips decided to do that, Jalin Hyatt broke it off and just presented his hands. But the pass, I think, was knocked down at the line of scrimmage, and Jalin Hyatt was so pissed. But it just made me realize, man, we got Malik Neighbors. And that guy, that guy's college tape, he was doing that routinely, just selling his vertical routes really well. And all the defensive backs and cornerbacks know how fast this individual is. So, but yeah, Andru Phillips, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalin Hyatt, it's going to be fun training camp battles for sure.
Yeah. And, we're just going to have to see what happens there because they're going to have an opportunity to play right away. And obviously, we saw that Andru Phillips was a top 30 private visit for the Giants, by the way, Nick. So we did, I think we did hear from Tyler Nubin in the draft after that he had a private workout, but the Giant, I don't think that counts as a top 30 private visit. But now they've had 2 more draft picks. That makes 9 in the last 3 classes from these top 30 visits. And look, some people have replied to me because I said, look, if you're looking for who the Giants are going to draft next year, just look at these top 30 visits and you're going to find some right away. People are like, oh, great. So we're just making a list and telling the league who we're going to take. And I understand that qualm that some fans might have. But you know what, Nick? I will sacrifice that, right? Especially in the draft. Nobody's caring what the Giants are doing. There might be a time that we trade ahead, but then there's probably somebody else on the board Giants will be fine with. It's round 2 and 3. But you know what? I'll sacrifice that, Nick, to avoid ever having another Kadarius Toney or DeAndre Banker situation. You know how those situations happen? Not spending enough time. They did 2 separate meetings with somebody like Tyler Nubin and Andru Phillips and Malik Neighbors, these types of players. Bring them in for the top 30. Bring them at the combine. Talk to them. Get to know them. Don't just go to the combine, like I said yesterday with Kadarius Toney. Be like, he made us laugh at 12 at night. We love this bubbly personality. What the F are you doing? Spend time with these guys because you know what? there's one way to really guarantee a bust aside from the football stuff. It's that if you're not dedicated to the game and your position and becoming the best. Kadarius Toney, clear that's the case. We all know that now after his time with the Chiefs. It's guaranteed. It wasn't just the Giants. And honestly, DeAndre Baker, that situation isn't great either. So I will take that, Nick. To me, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of tipping off your hands the rest of the NFL personally.
I mean, I don't even think of it like that. That's a kind of a silly way to think of it. You're going to bring these guys in because you want to know how they mesh with your team because you're interested in their skill sets and what you saw on tape.
Right.
You're not bringing in people you're not interested in. Now, you might bring them in and then check them off if the personality doesn't mesh with them. But the reason you're bringing them in is because you're interested in their skill set. And likely that player had like 3 or 4 or 5 other top 30 visits. I mean, the Giants interviewed J.J. McCarthy twice, and they passed up on him. It doesn't mean that you're going to take him. It's just I don't even understand that way of thinking. But yeah, no, dude. So you brought up one stat about Andru Phillips about the stops. There were so many screens ran towards his direction. And God, man, I absolutely loved how he fought through stalk blocks, how he came downhill, even from depth, man. And he just attacked the wide receiver. He usually positioned himself well to either box that player back to the inside or spill him towards the sideline and then force him outside. So everything from the grit and the toughness. I mean, that's what they talked about, Joe Shane and Brian Dable with Malik Neighbors, right? Oh, we love his grit. We love his toughness. Andru Phillips has that in spades, man.
Yeah, you're right about that, Nick, and I'm really excited about him as well. And I think let's talk a little bit about Tyler Nubin, the Giants' second-round pick here. That's a pick where I feel like the Giants kind of did a good job of meeting value and need. I don't know how you feel about that. Did you feel like that was a fine pick from a value standpoint at 47 overall? Because obviously it's a need.
It is a need. There were other players I did like. I was liking Tyler Nubin maybe a little bit later, but I've been a big fan of Tyler Nubin this entire time. So when it comes down to it, it's just like, shut up, Nick. You're being a little bit too picky. And I think they got a really good football player. I think they got a really smart football player. I think they got a football player who's going to create turnovers on a defense that really has not created that many turnovers. Last year, they were actually a little bit better at that than they were in 2022. And I think he also fits what Shane Bowen wants to do. I just don't think he's somebody that you're going to necessarily want to be playing man coverage. I hope the Giants are weary of his deficiencies and they don't allow the offense to dictate when they are in man coverage to create mismatches or certain zone coverages as well. Because when you're running quarters, man, it just kind of divulges, like Palms quarters divulges into man coverage at a certain point. And Tyler Nubin, he is a little stiff. It's a little bit stiff in the hips. But holy crap, is he very smart. He is good in run support. There are times where he's just like throwing his shoulder into players, and I don't necessarily love that. But there are also times, especially in 2022, if you go through some of his 2022 tape, he is sifting through traffic and pursuing guys from the backside and making these really impressive tackles for stops if PFF wanted to quantify it. So overall, I really like the player. I think he's going to offer a different type of skill set. I don't necessarily think he has post ability, meaning being that single high rover. I think he's more the guy you're going to want to drop into a robber role. He could play quarters. He could play the deep half, but single high, no. So if the Giants are in middle of the field closed, I guess cover 3 maybe, but like cover 1, I'm not certain if that's going to be a role, even though he did do that at Minnesota, that the Giants are going to use him in extensively. But he's a long strider. That's what once he gets going, he can get going. I think he clocked in at like 21.4 miles per hour this past year. So he does have a speed. I know he ran like a 4.59, which isn't all that great. But once he gets going and he can use those long strides because he's a big dude, then he can cover some ground. But it's not somebody who has this elite change of direction. And it's a little bit different. I would say a different type of skill set than Xavier McKinney.
Yeah.
But still has the intelligence factor that Xavier McKinney also possessed.
I think that's a great way to break it down, Nick. And I think he may, I wouldn't say it's interesting because they were drafted in a similar range, actually, when I'm not only thinking about it. McKinney was 10 picks drafted, 8 to 10 picks, before 10 picks, was he 37 overall? So they were drafted in a similar range. And I was just going to talk about, and we'll get to more Nubin, similar thing happened to them in the pre-draft process. A lot of people said that Nubin would have been a first-round pick if he came out last year. And then a lot of people said that part of the reason he fell was because of that RAS score that I'm sure you've seen, cycling around the internet right now. It's an unbelievably bad RAS score. I mean, not just the 40-yard dash across the board. But then I saw a great question by the Giants beat writer, so kudos to them. And I think it might lead to some value because remember, with Xavier McKinney, the reason he fell to day 2 for the Giants when he was projected first round pick the whole time is because he ran the 40-yard dash with a pulled hamstring and ran like a 4.6. I think it was 4.61, or maybe it was 4.59, something in that range. and that allowed him to drop to the Giants. Now he just signed a $17 million a year contract with the Packers. But Nubin discussed this because a great question was asked by a Giants reporter that he asked him, and I don't know who it was. So obviously, when you look at these transcripts, it doesn't say the reporter. So shout out to whichever reporter asked this question. But the reporter says, I read that you had, and I didn't know about this, Nick. I'm not sure if you did. And the reporter said, I read that you had a knee surgery after the season. Just what was the problem with your knee and how much did it affect you in the pre-draft process? Tyler Newman said, yeah, I played 6 games on a torn meniscus last year. I didn't know that either. He said, I got it scoped at the end of the season, and then I tried to accelerate my recovery process to get myself ready for the combine because I really wanted to compete at the combine and hopefully my pro day. And he said, that kind of bit me in the butt a little. It affected me, but honestly, I wouldn't do anything differently than I did because I just really wanted to compete. And I like that last part, but what I like the most is there's value here because clearly, like, everyone's going to look at this testing, this RAS and this 40 time, but it was impacted. This guy's trying to rush back from a torn meniscus and a scope on his knee. He's not 100% for the combine. He's not 100% for his pro day when he's doing these testing. And so you're going to get the testing numbers, but that might not be the actual athlete. And I'm not sitting here, Nick, and telling the listeners or you that I think this is like, he should have been a 9.8 RAS score. This is one of the best athletes in the draft. I do think he mostly wins with instincts and physicality and wherewithal. But the athlete that the RAS score suggests he is, just like the 3.6 RAS score, he's not that athlete either. Like, if he was that athlete, he'd be an undrafted free agent, even with good tape, or he'd be like a Geno Stone drafted on the last day, or whatever the Ravens got him, or like a Cam Kitchens drafted at the end of day 3. Like, that's where he would be if he was that kind of athlete on tape. He's not that kind of athlete on tape. I think it's very important to note that. Like, I feel like that's a big factor as to why the RAS score was as bad as it was.
And it makes me feel so much better that he actually had that knee scope and he was dealing with an injury. First off, you're a tough SOB if you're playing through a knee injury like that. But secondly, and more importantly, the tape that really gave me an issue, I do still think he is tight, but is Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, he got burnt on a deep 7 route. He was taking poor angles. And if he was
the season.
Yes. And if he was playing through this knee injury, it makes me feel a little bit better because, he might not be the best like man coverage type of safety, but I think in a different situation, maybe he would have positioned himself more optimally if his knee wasn't as good, right? Like on the deep 7 route, I don't have it in front of me, but it was bad. Like, it was like, dude, this guy's going to be almost a first round pick. Like, what are you talking about? I don't know if you remember the exact play, but if he's playing through a knee, there's a lot you need to consider when you're playing through an injury like that. And that just shows how damn tough he is. And, it plays right into what Brian Dable and Joe Shane want.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch. I'm excited to go back and watch more of Nubin and kind of try to compare those games before the final 6 that he played through the torn meniscus and after. And then I didn't watch any of his 2022, which I know people liked more. I want to go back and look at that too. I always like to compare. I don't like how a lot of this draft process, this is the qualm I have with general draft process. There seems to be a much more weight given on the 2023 than 2022 or the year of tape rather than the year before. I felt like this was the case with like Drake May and some of these other prospects. And I'm just like, I'd rather just look at the whole body of work because there's different circumstances that happen with your supporting cast every year. And like, that never gets factored in, but just something to think about. And then, I said, Nick, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say with Nubin, one aspect of his game that really enhances the intelligence is also the ball skills.
Yes.
He catches like a wide receiver, like presents his hands, plucks it out of the sky, man, plucks the ball out of the sky. Like he has very soft and natural hands operating over the middle of the field. He was one of the safeties that I watched, and one of the reasons why I liked him so much is because of how spatially aware he is and how he understands where the routes are. And he does such a damn good job just sitting there in the middle of the field and watching what the quarterback is doing. And once the quarterback makes a decision, he reacts, and he came away with a lot of interceptions, intercepting like backside digs that the quarterback tried to get to. And Nubin was like, "Nah, son, I'm not going to allow that to happen." So we got a smart guy operating in the back end. I just hope that the slight athletic limitations don't end up hurting him out there or making him a liability.
Yeah, and it could. We never know. The jump to the NFL, the speed of the game, you just can't predict that sometimes, Nick. But that's something that we're going to find out. But I do love that he was a captain for Minnesota. I do love that I think he's going to kind of operate immediately in that kind of role with the Giants. 90% of the snaps, captain type guy, leader of the secondary. They kind of just needed that, dude. Like, they lost McKinney. Like, it wasn't really just going to be great if they just walked into the season like, all right, we'll just trot out what we got here at safety and just hope for the best. They needed kind of one of these like dudes and he was that dude for Minnesota. And I love that he spent his first season at Minnesota on the bench, sitting there, learning from my favorite safety in the NFL, Antoine Winfield Jr., who probably is a great guy to learn from because he's one of the best safeties again in the NFL. The guy who I wanted the Giants to take in that draft, and obviously he's been just a phenomenal All-Pro player for the Bucs. And then after that, 2021, 2022, 2023, he played for Minnesota and basically inherited a similar role and as that leader of the secondary. That's going to be big. And I credited Nick, the Giants reporters, for that great question they presented about the injury. Though I do wish that they got one in that they didn't get in, Nick. And I did wish that they asked him, just to go over, hey, Tyler, when you're on vacation, it's the bye week of your season. What are some of your plans for your bye week? Do they involve anything regarding an ATV? Are you okay not using ATVs on your bye week? No, nothing. Damn it.
No, I was actually typing to
that was a Nick Filato joke,
Dash.
by the way. I feel like that was up your alley because when I put it on Twitter, I used the badoom.
Yeah, I was actually not paying attention to what you were saying. I was paying attention to the chat, unfortunately. Now I'm very upset with myself because
I feel like you would have got joke. Like that. You would have picked it up.
Sorry,
and
man.
There's a Filato type.
You know who I'm blaming? I'm blaming Big Dash because I was responding to Big Dash. He said, "Hey, I missed the first part." First off, BD, I don't know why you missed the first part. And then he says, "How are we feeling overall?" And I said, "We're feeling fine, BD." And then I hear you just stop, and I automatically had that Bill Burr moment where I was like, "Oh shit, I just heard a stop." Like, what the hell? Damn.
It's all right. It's tough to multitask with podcasters because you're like trying to. You have notes.
I have 9 tabs open right now.
Yeah, I have so many tabs open. It's disgusting. It's actually disgusting. If I click one of these tabs, I'm risking clicking the X just because they're so small and how much to work with. But then I have my notes, which is, the guy in the comments like, why are you always showing off your biceps? I'm not. I'm just moving to my next tab up here. So sometimes you're looking through your notes and it's hard to always listen. But I'm now disappointed I presented that joke at the time I did, Nick, because it was a Nick Filato joke right up your alley. But yeah, let's make sure no ATVs for Tyler Nubin. I think that's pretty important here for the Giants. We don't want to go through that again.
I love that you went back to the joke, dude. I have so much respect for that. I do. I have so much respect for that, Dan.
And one day, by the way, Nick, we're going to, not today, but we're going to talk about some of what else happened. I love when we do the podcast where we talk about the NFC East because I was just looking through some of my notes and I have some stuff on that. We don't have to do that right now. But back to the players the Giants drafted. Tyler Nubin held quarterbacks to a passer rating of 39.6 last season, which is phenomenal. He was PFF's highest graded safety for what that's worth. And I mentioned earlier, you talked about how he's a springy athlete. I mentioned earlier with Nubin, he was the 31st ranked player overall on Trevor Sycam's big board.
I didn't say he was a springy athlete.
Sorry, I think you were saying that with Drew Phillips, were you not?
Yeah, Andrew Phillips. Yeah, I think he is a tight athlete, Tyler Nubin.
By the way, he wants to be called Drew Phillips, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
He told reporters that tonight.
I could screw with that. I really do love Tyler Nubin. I am a little bit concerned about. He's a little bit stiff, but once he gets going, he can accelerate. It's just once you get up into his cushion a little bit, it's the transitions, it's the flipping of the hips, which is the polar opposite of Andrew Phillips because that dude is just WD-40 all over him because he just freaking opens his hips like I've already said this like 6 times, but so freaking smoothly.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting player for the Giants to have. And also one more final thing on Nubin that just caught my attention. I put it in my notes. Nick Saban had him as the best safety in the class. Nick Saban's a OG in this game. Like I like when Nick Saban or somebody like that is going to give. Like I said, this is a big day too when it comes to the draft Knicks and the scouts and the coaches and if they get these right, the Giants hit because they love these 2 picks. And I like the fits for the secondary, fits for the new system, revamping the secondary. We talked about it yesterday. Like this was the biggest need coming in today. There's no denying it. Everybody wanted an O-lineman. I get it. We're big trench guys. We would have loved to have somebody to put next to Dexter Lawrence on the other side. I think the Giants would have been interested in some of those players, but they came off the board all before the Giants picked at 47. Chris Jenkins was still there, but outside of Jenkins, there weren't any guys that we discussed. There were some guys that people liked, but they went off the board fast. One to the Commanders, which I don't love. What are you laughing at?
I'm just talking with BD in the chat.
Okay.
But now the Commanders and the Cowboys. I mean, Cooper Beebe was a favorite of this podcast. We're gonna get to see him, but hopefully, like what is
get
he?
Into that.
Dexter Lawrence got like 9 inches of arm length on him. You know what I'm saying? Just freaking, he's crazy. Like so, hopefully that can work in the Giants' favor. But yeah, we really like Cooper Beebe, and we'll get into that in a podcast probably like next week though.
Yeah, for sure. Ball production you mentioned earlier with Tyler Nubin, 13 interceptions over the last 3 seasons. Despite playing in the Big Ten, which I always like to credit because I always feel like it's tougher to get ball production in the Big Ten because there's a lot of run first teams and there's not as much downfield throwing. It's not like you're playing in the Big 12 or the SEC. So I just like the ball production. I like the versatility. You mentioned that as well. 198 snaps last year in the box, 468 in the deep half, played over the slot for 84 snaps. So something he can do there as well. Both these guys, I like the frame. I like their build. I like you talked about their ability to come downhill in the alley, play physical style of football. That's important, I think, always for defensive backs. I've seen so many defensive backs through the years, and I tend to like the ones more who have that production at the point of contact. And that's even something like guys have like hung on to roster spots for, right? Like Darnay Holmes hung on to a roster spot for a long time with questionable at best coverage because he was so good around the line of scrimmage as a tackler on those screens and diagnosing and things of that nature. So I like that both these guys are going to come in and be pretty physical players at the contact point.
Yeah, and that's all we can ask for at this point. Look, we got to round out that secondary, and the Giants now have 3, I would say, competent safeties that you can rotate and use interchangeably to some degree with Dane Belton. If Dane Belton can progress a little bit more, he can be that single high guy if you're looking to run single high. It's just having him be that single high guy and the last support beam or whatever you want to say in run support is kind of the problem with Dane Belton because the run support has been an issue. But Jason Pinnock and Tyler Nubin, that's a big safety group. Those are 2 big, somewhat rangy safeties that you have who can also, once they come downhill, they're coming downhill, like they're firing downhill. So should be interesting to see how Shane Bowen wants to use them.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, Nick. I was just looking at this too. I did like the draft video. Did you see the draft video with Tyler Nubin?
Which one?
When the Giants called him to tell him he's going to be the pick.
Yeah, very emotional.
He's crying. And I like that. First of all, this gets into the whole thing. We're going to have a lot of people on here who are happy with that video and they're like, we love this. But then they're the same people who like Caleb Williams going to be a bust because he cried. There's a fun level of hypocrisy in that, which I'm not going to get too further into because I'm not going to try to call people out. I'm a hypocrite as well in my life in some situations. But I think we can all agree, or not all agree, but some of us can agree that I'm good with that level of emotion from my Giants players. Like that means he cares. That means Tyler Nubin's going to come in and this is his job. This is his livelihood. This is his life. He's putting everything into it. So he cried, but I don't think that makes him less of a man or anything like that, Nick. I'm pretty sure you agree with me on that one.
Yeah, no, I don't care that he cried that he got selected into the NFL, which is a dream that
his dream come true. Like it doesn't make you less of a man if you have emotions, in my mind at least. But I thought that was a really cool video to see, and I just think these guys that they got tonight, I have a good feeling about them. I especially good feeling about Andru Phillips. I just can't explain it. It's something about the way that he plays the game, and just that those change of direction skills and the explosiveness in his game. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about both these picks. I'm excited about the direction they're headed in the secondary. Honestly, dude, the defense is starting to shape up and look pretty interesting going into this year. We talked about last year, the defense kind of played a big role down the stretch and then winning a lot of those games that they won. Patriots game, the Washington game where they forced 6 turnovers, even the Green Bay game, they came up really big in spots against Jordan Love there. And Jordan Love was cooking at that time of his year. It's like they played a big role there too. The Eagles game at the end of the year against Jalen Hurts, the defense was phenomenal in that game. And I know Jalen Hurts was going through some things there, and so was the Eagles offense, but defense still came to play and they still had to do their job. So the transition, people were a little nervous about. I got to be honest with you, Nick, I kind of feel better about the defense going into next year, even in a new system, than I did last year. Yeah, we lose A'Shawn Robinson. I'd rather have Brian Burns if I could pick one of the two. And I just feel like there's more talent now in the secondary, even after losing Xavier McKinney, which is crazy to think about. But I think, and it's a little bit of a stretch maybe there. That maybe I can walk back a little, but I don't know, man.
I don't know if it's. I didn't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, do it.
It's interesting because you did add Andru Phillips, and I think Andru Phillips, at least early in the season, has the potential and the ceiling. And I know that those are just words at this point. They actually have to manifest into something to be better than any cornerback the Giants had last year, not named Adoree Jackson, who's not here. So the loss of Adoree and Xavier McKinney, and Adoree didn't really have that.
2023 wasn't even that good. That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point. Like he didn't have the best. So it's at least in the conversation. I think though Xavier McKinney, just where he is playing and how he is playing right now,
Sure.
is it's hard to compare him to Tyler.
Part of this
It's
is
unfair to
projection
Tyler.
too for me. Like I think
Yeah.
Deontay Banks is almost a guarantee to take a big step.
Yeah.
So now we get much better there. And I just this is cautious optimism. I may be way wrong on this, but I have a little bit of cautious optimism on Cordell Flott and an off coverage system. We'll see if I'm wrong about that, but I just think it much better fits who he is as a player.
And we all know the pass rush is married to coverage.
And right,
exactly. Brian Burns is here now, baby.
It's a big difference. Like
big difference.
Brian Burns is especially given the fact that they brought him in for a reason, not just who he is, but who he could be in Shane Bowen's system. That's the big thing with Brian Burns that I'm very excited about. So defense has me very excited heading into this year. Obviously, the offense we'll get to on another day, and it is what it is. We're gonna have to figure those things out. But do you want to do we have any questions from the super chat? I also want to talk some day 3 targets.
Yeah. Before we get to those questions in super chat, I know we weren't going to talk a lot about this, but I just happened to stumble across Washington's draft, and then I'm just
my God, it's such a good draft. They did such a good job.
Jaden Daniels, Johnny Newton, the Illinois defensive tackle, Mike Sanderstill, Michigan cornerback, Ben Sinnott
traded back and then got Sinnott, who we liked.
And then your boy Luke McCaffrey along with Brandon Coleman, the TCU guard. So it's just holy crap, man.
Fire draft for them. And then I don't even want to talk about the Eagles. The Cooper DeJean thing makes me so angry. My brother and me texted this every year. We say that it's literally every year. Before the pick happened, when Cooper was falling, we said the Eagles are going to get Cooper DeJean. My brother texted me that. I'm like, what? Because I always say, Nick, and this is annoying because of what I do for work at CBS Sports, and I know you agree with me on this, but I just hate the current draft process, how picks are tipped off on Twitter and how the picks are in before the broadcast. I love hearing it. I want the fun of this for me is hearing it on the broadcast. I get to hear the first letter of the name, the first phrase of the name. I want to hear it. And I know all the names, so I want to hear it. But then when it's tipped off, and this happened to the Giants twice this year, dude. The first pick, and especially the Drew Phillips pick. That was in 5 minutes before they announced it. So I had to keep my phone down. I had to look away from work, my work Slack. I'm don't want to see anything. My text chat's going off. It just annoys me. But we said before the DeJean pick happened, we knew it was going to the Eagles. We knew they'd find a way to trade up. I just feel dude, Howie Roseman just knows when to strike in the draft. He knows when to trade back. He knows when to trade up. He knows when to find spots to find value in. He knows to get DeAndre Swift for a 6th-round pick swap, and then he gets probably a comp pick back next year, whatever stupid crap he does. It's annoying how good Howie Roseman is at his job.
It could just be him calling a lot of people and just exploring all the options and just calling and calling and calling.
He's got 17 lines in the Eagles draft room.
And also just being an opportunist.
Yeah.
Right? Just realizing, okay, I don't think the Lions are in on DeAndre Swift. How about I give them a call and see what it takes? And I think he might just do that for every situation with every player that him and his pro scouting department, whatever player that they're interested in, they just call and they investigate it. And it's no, Howie. But then sometimes, you know what? I don't want this asshole.
All right,
give me a 5th, or something.
I wouldn't even pick up the phone if Howie's calling me. You're not going to get a good deal. This dude wins all the deals, so don't give him a deal. It's like in fantasy football when somebody's crushing you and when it has that reputation of killing you in trades, and you don't make trades with that manager. And so they see Cooper DeJean fall. I thought Cooper DeJean was a top 20 player in this draft, top 25. And I think he's one of the best playmakers that was even available in the whole class on defense. I didn't like this defensive class. He's falling. It's 30, pick 40. Of course, the Eagles find a way to trade up. And then he knows and understands later he trades back to recoup assets. It's not like that's it. He's just making these Gettleman-esque trade ups. He's also coming back later and trading back to get more assets. So now the Cowboys have been having some interesting drafts lately, by the way. I think they've been really going with, I feel like, their guys, and we can talk about that. We'll get into more of this on another podcast, but I'll just TLDR. I'm not as devastated about what the Cowboys did in their draft, but Eagles and Washington had some pretty damn good drafts for sure. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the NFC East is really shaping up and getting interested.
It is, man. It is. Do you want to do super fan chats and then get to some day 3 targets?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start right here with Chase. Chase, thank you so much for your donation. Says, love the show, guys. Listen to it at work. So the longer episodes, better, in my opinion.
Well, that works because Nick and I like to talk. These tend to go pretty long. So I know some people like the long episodes. Some people tell me like the short episodes. It's really a mixed bag. So we just kind of go with the flow and adjust toward what people say. So all feedback is appreciated.
And Chase, we really appreciate that. Hopefully you're still getting the job done as Dan and I sit here and talk about the Giants. Man Ray, thank you so much for the donation. Says, Keep up the great work, guys. I've heard people bash the Phillips pick, but I have heard people compare him
Wow.
to Jair Alexander, which I'll take at 70.
I mean,
Yeah. I love Jair Alexander at Louisville, and Andrew Phillips isn't that, but I can understand just from an explosiveness and an athletic trait standpoint. Look, to play cornerback in the NFL, you need to be an elite athlete. An elite athlete of athletes out of all the human beings. You need to be an elite athlete of just football players. And then you have players who are like Andrew Phillips, who are the top tier of that.
right.
And that's why I'm excited about it. It's just you have to realize it's not complete yet, but
True.
that's why you have coaches. One of the
Great
reasons
point.
why you have coaches.
Yeah. That's a great way to break it down, though. If you don't have those traits, you're not going to get to that benchmark, especially going against the guys like Jamar Chase and all these Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, and anyone else who the Giants are going to have to match up against. So thank you so much, Man Ray, for the donation. And hopefully whoever that scout is who compared him to Jair Alexander is right, because then Joe Shane is keeping his job for a long time.
Bill Hartnett, no ATVs for either of these.
No
guys.
ATVs, baby. Keep them off.
No ATVs. I gotta say, man, geez, please just don't do that, guys. Let's just be done. Like, I feel like this, like ridiculous. Like, it probably happens to every NFL franchise, but that just is like a giant thing at this point.
Oh, it's such a giant thing, dude. It's not
like I didn't
think it's just us.
Whenever you become that, where it's just you're an adjective, and it's like it's a giant thing. It's like, oh, damn it,
It's never just. You're right. That actually is never a good thing. It's never like no one says that about. Well, I guess you can say that. Is that ever used in a good way?
Not well, like it's the Jets and the Browns,
Yeah,
and the Lions.
right.
It was like the three franchises in the NFL.
Now the Giants are getting in the mix in that regard.
Yeah, with just dumb stuff. Like, just come on, let's break this. Let's break this curse, guys.
Yeah.
Patrick, thank you so much, Patrick. Says Trey Hawkins. Is he in the bust category now? Because didn't he impress at last year's preseason? So I don't think you can be really a bust if you're a 6th round pick.
I was just gonna say that.
but to Patrick's point, I think this is what Patrick is trying to get at is, and this is a product of the media. He was built up so much, Trey Hawkins, coming out of training camp. He had a really good training camp, and that's excellent for him. That should not be held against him. I just think the expectations that were ascribed to Trey Hawkins III were just unfair. He had a good training camp, right? Then he had to man up against Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, on third and long, and there's no safety up over the top.
Really weird.
Not Wink's best call. But and you know who else? I mean, the Giants offense and Daniel Jones were cooking in training camp. Training camp is just not. It's like birds. They're not real. No, I'm kidding about birds. I believe in birds.
Yeah, no, that's a Tip Ryman though.
I know he went tonight. He actually came off the board.
Tip Ryman is so funny because you watch him block, and I was like, "Oh, I love this guy. This is great. I love the way this guy blocks."
Watch him run routes,
dude. And then I watched him do anything with catching the football, or anything with receiving, and I was like,
"I think the way he moves is just never going to move in the NFL."
He's a good athlete.
He's a good athlete on paper. This is like a paper versus what I watch thing, and I didn't watch that much of him. Like I try to watch a little bit of everyone, but from what I watched, I'm like, this speed it's Big Ten. It's like barely passable in the Big Ten. I just can't see it working in the NFL. We'll see if I'm wrong about that, but he'll be able to block. Like he's going to be like your Chris Manhertz or whatever, your Jack Stahl, right?
That's why he was brought in. I mean, I think he went to the Cardinals, so he's with McBride now. McBride's going to be the receiver, and Tip Ryman has cinder blocks attached to his hands.
And he plays his role, and that's fine.
Absolutely. Big Dash. BD knows. Thank you so much, Big Dash. Says, didn't mean to slam the door on the way out. LOL. We love you,
Big
BD.
Dash. Yeah. I love Big Dash, and I love him especially because I think during the draft process, we've had some fun conversations, and we don't even always see eye to eye on all the prospects. And he's one of those people, which I always love these people who, if you don't see eye to eye on a prospect, you don't turn it into some personal tirade against the person or like get angry and all this stuff. Like everyone, the people who understand, like we can all have our own different opinions on prospects, and that's just part of the game. Like it's so much better like that way. It's not like this personal thing.
He's one of the coolest dudes on.
And he's a great content creator, by the way. Great voice as well for this game.
You know who else is a great content creator? Sal, the content creator. Yes,
for sure. Sal, the content creator. Yes.
Yeah, he's the only content creator.
We know it, by the way. We may be doing a post.
We'll do that. We'll get.
And it's going to be an interesting, heated one because me and Sal have had some discussions since last night, and he does not agree with us about the way we've our thoughts on day one of the Giants draft, because he was very much so, Joe Shane had to get a quarterback no matter what type of thing.
Okay, let's move on to Victor Perez. Nick, how long have you been a Viltrumite? I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
Yeah, I'm not
Viltrumite.
certain.
I've never even heard that word.
Yeah.
And I just want to correct something. Sal wasn't get a quarterback no matter what. He felt like there were quarterbacks that should have been drafted. So he just felt like there were quarterbacks good enough to
Is
get.
is that what a Viltrumite is?
Someone who wants a
Somebody who
quarterback.
believes that you need to get a quarterback.
You got to get
Sal's a
a
Viltrumite. Yeah, Victor, please put in the comments what the hell that is.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't feel
what,
like
I don't no
Googling
idea
it.
what a Viltrumite is.
Yes, and then Bill Hartnett, and this is the last one as of right now. Thank you so
Okay.
much for the donations, everybody. Says or asks, and no corners returning punts for that matter. Yes, Bill.
Oh yeah.
We don't want quarterbacks doing that. Let's not do that. And Malik Neighbors, you're not going to do that either because you muff punts, and I don't want you back there. But it would be like, dude, this kickoff rule. We haven't talked extensively about it. I am excited about this because I think there are ways that smart NFL teams can find a way to game this with their personnel. And I'm just wondering if the Giants have one of those people on their roster right now.
They could, and it'll be something. A lot of people I've heard talk about this topic think that it's going to be a much bigger part of the game this year than people. I don't want to say project it right now, Nick, but just know about it right now or just consider it right now because we haven't seen it yet. That happens a lot with things that we haven't seen yet. So I'll be interested to see. I know you're on that page too, and I'm feeling that way too. So maybe that'll be something that we see this year. Giants have a new special teams coach in, obviously, so we're gonna have to see how that goes and what he can bring to the special teams unit. We're hoping can only go up from there.
D-Kit, thank you so much, my man, for the donation. Says, I missed the start of the pod. Do you guys think Phillips is a boundary cornerback? Do you think he's an outside cornerback? I think he probably will more so occupy the slot, but I think it's an option that he can play the boundary or he can play outside.
Yeah, I think Nick's right. And I think it could be matchup based, right? Like there could be some games versus teams that have boundary receivers that he can match up against. And so he'll play on the outside. And I know Joe Shane said he's going to start in the slot, but that's not where he's going to be limited to. We're going to play him on the outside as well. So I would think it could be matchup dependent. I'm not so sure you want him against like a, Marvin Harrison Jr. probably on the outside, but there'll be some situations where you can get him in.
Bill Hartnett gave us some context on what a Viltrumite is. It is not somebody who just believes drafting a quarterback is the necessary thing for the New York Giants to do. It's from the Invincible cartoon. Viltrumites are a highly advanced alien race of extremely powerful humanoids. Had to look it up myself. Thank you, Bill and Victor. I don't understand why I constitute as a Viltrumite. Do they all have mustaches?
I know exactly. I'm so mad that I didn't get this the first time. So when he asked that, I knew the word, like I had heard Viltrumite before. So that's why I was like, what is this? What is this? I couldn't figure it out. And I have seen the first half of Invincible. I saw season 1 of Invincible, which I don't usually watch any cartoons, Nick, but my friend told me I had to watch this. And I don't love, as I've been more into superhero stuff lately. I know me and you had a similar path. We never watched superhero and then we started Marvel and we liked it and we liked it more than we thought we would. This is a great superhero show because it's like deep and in depth. And it's like, not just like your all action, all like not like, classic tropes type stuff. And the reason he said that is because you look like the main Viltrumite character, like he's a complicated character. He's a bad guy and a good guy, but with that mustache, he has like the similar mustache. Just type in right Invincible. I'm going to type it into it because
is this the guy with like the Paulie Walnuts hair where he has like the gray on the sides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's so silly.
And with the mustache.
Yeah, I saw it. It's very silly.
You kind of look like him. So I kind of get it now.
Okay, I might have to bring this up for let's see. I don't know if anybody
bring it up. You can share screen.
Nah, it's weird to like get the picture up here, but you can look it up. I look nothing like the guy. He just has a mustache.
I know, it's probably true. I haven't seen the show in a while. All right, Nick, let's close out tonight with some of our favorite day 3 targets. I don't know if you have a list or not, but if not, I can go through some of mine and see where you're at on these guys first.
Yeah, I was putting my targets together right before I jumped on this. I mean, Aldrich Estime is still around, and he's somebody that I've brought up a lot. A lot of these running backs I'm open to on day 3.
Me too.
You know what, man? And I wanted to kind of get into one of them with you because I know you've said that you haven't loved him, but at this point of the draft, Braylon Allen to me is somebody.
Braylon Allen. I thought you were going to say somebody else.
No, but like why
Braylon Allen?
Yeah, why are you so like or are you anti Braylon Allen now, or was that more of like when he was getting like late second, early third round buzz?
Definitely more late second, early third round buzz, but he's not on my day 3 targets list. And there's like 5 running backs I'd rather have than Braylon Allen. I don't really understand Braylon Allen that much, I guess, from a projection standpoint. He's big, he's young. That's going to work in his favor, but he doesn't play as powerful as he should for his size. His runs too high for me. He does the stuff well with like the footwork behind the line of scrimmage, the nifty footwork that looks good on highlights. But that doesn't, to me, it's not going to work at the NFL. He's not going to have the time to do it at the NFL. I haven't seen much at all success from a zone running standpoint. I think he's just purely power gap. But then I also then look at it like, is his style even going to work in power gap in the NFL from a projection standpoint? I don't think he has breakaway speed. Not that I care about that, but I don't really just generally love his burst anyway. Don't think he has force missed tackle upside. Maybe he can become better at running with power. There was a lot of hype around him coming into Wisconsin. He's 18 years old. You know, a lot of running backs produce at Wisconsin, but they don't always produce at the NFL level, with the exception of Jonathan Taylor. This is not like, again, like you're going to take a chance on a 19-year-old, whatever he is, 20 at this point, 6'4", like huge dude with nimble feet. Like he should like bet on traits, kind of, it seems like on paper, but I don't know, man. Like I don't see the projection personally. He's not on my short list. But
So
I thought you were going to ask somebody else. But go ahead.
So I didn't have an evaluation on Braylon Allen, but
Okay.
I watched just Wisconsin through watching Big Ten defenders, and
Yeah.
I came away liking him
Okay.
kind of for a day 3 guy. Not as much as Audric Estime, that's my dude.
Yeah.
But I was going in it thinking I was
Most
going to
people do.
hate it because of your evaluation of it,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, you know what? No, this guy isn't. I don't know. I think he has more speed than maybe I thought he would.
He has more
probably.
speed than you think he would.
Yeah.
But it's just like, what would you say his calling card is? Just the nimble feet for his size?
I think it's the size in the nimble feet.
Okay. Because he doesn't
Yeah.
use it. Do you think he uses his size well?
I didn't watch a lot of him.
Yeah.
You would have a much better much better outlook on that than I would.
Like to me, Audric Estime is just watching those two back to back. I'm just like, this dude to me is a much better running back.
I love that
Estime
is still around.
And
like,
he's
I
on
hope
my list.
Estime is the pick.
But you know who's also still around that a lot of people love? Some people said he was RB1 in this class, RB3, and then I just didn't like when I watched his tape. No, he got drafted at the end by who got him? Good pick, Packers, team that never misses really in their back. Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. I watched him for CBS Sports. I had a whole scouting profile on him. I'm not as big a fan of him as other people are. We'll see what happens there. And I know a lot of he's on my list because he's still explosive and he still like adds a speed element that we would still then have Neighbors and Jalen Wright on our offense. We don't have any explosion going into this draft. Then we would get 2 explosive players that are currently not on the roster at all. That's cool. That's great. But he's still 1, 2, 3 backs down my list, Nick. Because I would take Audric Estime over him and I would take Tyrone Tracy over him. 2 backs who I like for us on day 3. And my thing with Jalen Wright is, dude, it's just very tough for me to project him because I'm watching him and I watched like 4 games of him at Tennessee. And it's just such fake. It looks so fake to me because Tennessee runs the offense. You've obviously watched a lot of Heupel and it's all spread out. He's just running into these 6-man boxes. And yes, he like breaks away, but it's like the guys are so far away converging on him. And I'm just like, this is never happening in the NFL. This dude just never going to have this kind of space to work with. So like it's a breakaway run at Tennessee. And he has these great breakaway run rates, explosive, even a pretty good 40-yard dash. But I see some pretty poor processing. And then I see a lot of his yards coming from just weird system stuff that I just don't buy into translating personally. So I'm not as high on Jalen Wright as others are, but I still have him my 3rd favorite running back target tomorrow because he still would add a new level of home run possibility to the Giants offense. They basically only have 1 player of right now in my mind, or no, 2 players of, obviously with Jalen Hyatt as well.
I know another guy who's going to be on that list is Will Shipley, right?
Oh yeah. Those are my backs.
Oh yeah. That's my guy. Yeah, no, not my guy, your guy. So me, if I look at the running back position, because I think the Giants' first pick could realistically be running back. The number 1 guy that I want is Audric Estime. I just think not only does he complement Singletary so well, but I think he has like true number 1 running back type of upside. Like you can give him 15, 16 carries a game and he can get you like 4.1, 4.2 yards per carry. He's always going to get you a couple yards kind of running back, right?
I think it's some James Conner vibes from him, which is great because you can have a lead back out of that type of player.
I actually love that. I don't know if I've heard anybody say that.
That's kind of how I feel. A little high of a runner. I think he's going to be a better receiver than he is at the NFL level than he was at the college level, just like James Conner was. And like you said, I think that's elite. Like I'm looking more for a lead back than like a part-time back right now. Just a potential for that at least. Because then if you hit on that, you're really hitting a home run. So he's obviously, I think he's number 1 on your wish list. He's number 1 on my wish list overall. A few other guys I want to talk about with you that are on my wish list. Mason McCormick, just an interesting move athlete type of guy that you take a gamble on an interior offensive line. Just think those movement skills are worth betting on and gambling on. Theo Johnson, the tight end out of Penn State. We've talked a lot about him. I talked about Tyrone Tracy. Brandon Dorless, interior defensive lineman. I would take a shot on him at this point. I don't know where you stand on that one. He's on my list. You know who's just falling in this draft, which there's got to be some weird medical thing, even though I will say I'm not happy that he's falling, but I'm happy that I was right about not ranking him as high as other people did by any means. Like, he was way lower on my list. Troy Franklin, he's still on the board. I didn't really like him that much as other people did, but he is 6'1", kind of a big, like, just.
I think he's still weaving in and out, running his gauntlet drill right now.
Yeah. Oh my God, that gauntlet drill was painful to watch. It was so weird looking. But so
I'll tell you, if I needed a receiver right now, like if I was a team, like say the Giants went with Drake May and they traded up, I would be fully all in on going to get Troy Franklin right now.
Okay.
Yeah. In day 3, absolutely. I think there are serious concerns. I think that he's not the most physical guy. I think he's like 180 pounds but like, man, you look at his feet and you look at his ability to run some routes. There is some real nuance to Troy Franklin. It's just, I don't know if there's going to be enough, if he's going to be physical enough to hold up in the NFL.
Good point. And maybe that's why he's falling, or there could be
But we've seen so many smaller receivers come in, and he's not small, but like he's a little bit like skinnier, thin framed guy. And like, it's the NFL right now. It's so against the defense. It's so tailored towards the offense, and that could assist Troy Franklin. But he's also like, he's the guy who, oh man, he dropped the pass, and it's just like, he has those kind of
frustrating watch.
Yeah.
Definitely something interesting to monitor. Another guy, it's again a position we probably won't go, but at this point, dude, if you want to tell me that we take Johnny Wilson, I'm in on that. This dude can be Darren Waller potentially in a few years. I like his tape. Like, I said this in the My Guys show. I was surprised at how much better he was. I really thought he was just going to be an athlete, because that's how most of these guys with these kind of profiles are. And then you watch him, and you're like, this guy's kind of good. And Jordan Travis kind of sucks in my mind, like from a target standpoint. Not to be mean. I know some people like Travis. I don't like Travis at all. I thought there was really, really bad passing quarterback play there at Florida State, holding back both of those receivers. So he's on my list. I have Ray Davis. I'm a big Ray Davis guy. I know he's older prospect. I just love his backstory, and then I just love what he brings. When I watch Ray Davis, I like the how low he runs. I like that he's at plus in the receiving game. He reminds me of, like, I had a good NFL comp. Now I'm forgetting. Nothing like a special, but one of those. It's a back that I'm remember. Was he a Bill? Who was this back? There was a back that like can essentially just. He can play your every down role if you need him. He can be there for the passing downs and for the early run downs and on the third downs. And that's kind of where I see.
Fred Jackson?
Oh, not Fred Jackson, but that's a great call. I can kind of see some Fred Jackson in this game, but a worse player than Fred Jackson. Like, it was I'm forgetting who it is now, and it might not even been a Bill. So don't think that.
Okay.
It's not but it's like it's not exactly a Fred Jackson type, but it's somebody who can play all 3 downs. I like Ray Davis at this stage of the draft. And then I have a couple other names that intrigue me at this stage of the draft. Again, this is just kind of a gut feel. I just like the bloodline. I like the fact that he'd be a leader for this defense. I liked his tape a lot against Drake May, and it's Jeremiah Trotter. I would go with Jeremiah.
Dude, you love the bloodline guys.
I love the bloodline.
I don't think it's a terrible call. I don't think it's a terrible call at all.
See it work out a lot. And I just think he's like kind of getting underrated in the process. He was mocked as like a first round pick last year, and that's over mocking. Like, he doesn't have the physical traits. And in today's NFL, nobody values these types of linebackers anymore, the non like super athletes, because like, what are you doing with them? But in round 4 or 5 or 6, like, they're going to add value to your roster, in my opinion. They're going to be leaders. They're going to be able to step in. He could, in my opinion, play the Micah McFadden role potentially immediately better than Micah McFadden. So he's on my list as well.
Dude, his measurables, his best measurable, bad. Other than his hand size, is his arm length at 25th percentile. Everything else
is so bad. The testing is so bad. And I understand. Like, maybe this is more of round 6 type of thing, but he's on my list. I still like Jeremiah Trotter. Jatavian Sanders from Texas. I'm not a huge Jatavian Sanders fan, but at this stage of the draft, like, that's I am fine betting on from an athletic standpoint. Malik Mustafa, we talked about him maybe yesterday. Add that physical presence. I know we just took a safety in Nubin. I still think we could potentially get more guys in the secondary. I just think he's potentially a good value. And then another guy who you mentioned that I've just been thinking about at like day 3 at some point, maybe round 5, round 6, if he keeps falling, is Mekhi Wingo. Like,
Okay.
I wouldn't mind just throwing that size and that potential ability and that quickness and potential in this chain bone system into the middle of my defensive line and just not a big role, just a rotational role.
I love the fact that you brought up Mekhi Wingo because he was one of the first players I was going to mention. Now, Javon
Nice.
Solomon is another one. Troy edge
Yeah.
rusher. Again, he's a 0 percentile height. He's 6 foot. I don't even know if he's going to get drafted because of that, but holy crap, can he bend an edge? And he's shot out of a cannon. And I think it's perfect for the wide 9 system the Giants going to run. Mo Kamara out of Colorado State is another edge rusher that I think the Giants had in for a top 30 visit, if I'm not mistaken. I believe I saw that. I'm not as enthused. Well, I like Mohamed Kamara, but Javon Solomon, I just think is very tailor-made for this system. Gabriel Murphy out of UCLA and then Austin Booker out of Kansas. Those are the edge rushers that really interest me at this point. You mentioned Mekhi Wingo, cornerback and safety. I'm not gonna really look into who's around. Maybe if it's a little bit later, DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchard, both of those Auburn guys, and Chris Abrams-Drain, the Missouri kid, and then Cam Hart, actually, I like to Notre Dame for an outside
on the
guy.
board, right?
So I lied to all of you, whoever, like all 500 of you or 415 of you who are watching this. I just lied right to you because there are actually a decent amount of cornerbacks that I'm still interested in, and I would not be upset if the New York Giants went and pursued those guys. But offensive line I was looking at, and I'm not. No one's really.
You don't like
jumping.
McCormick?
I haven't. Christian Mahogany is a name I've heard a lot, but I didn't watch a lot of Boston College this season. I watched them back in last year, and I don't really have a lot of film I can reflect back on. It's more so what people I trust are saying. So Mason McCormick too, getting a hold of South Dakota State film is very difficult. So I've heard good things about him, and I would trust Joe Shane. They have all the film. I trust that they would do their evaluation on them. But I don't really have much on them, and I know that the guys that we were hoping would fall, they're all off the board.
Yeah. And that's going to happen. McCormick is the one I like more than Mahogany just because I like the athletic profile. I haven't watched either of them extensively on tape. I've seen some cut-ups, but McCormick, I just like to bet on the traits from an athleticism standpoint. Mahogany, just reading his profile from an athleticism, I feel like he's more of that old school power gap guy, but like sometimes I see those prospects and they end up just not having the requisite athleticism to ever make it in the NFL. Like Shane Lemieux is the type of guy that I think about when I think of a player like that.
Isn't that what your apartment smells like?
Mahogany.
Rich mahogany. Anchor man. All right. Yeah. That was stupid. But there was a couple other names here. You mentioned Brandon Dorless. Brandon Dorless can fill that Jihad Ward role. Now, this is a Martindale system, but he can be kicked inside. He can play edge in certain situations. He's not somebody who's going to like reach out and grab you. I don't think like he's not going to really interest you, but at this point of the draft, he's a productive player who can come in and fill a needed role at this point. And then linebacker. Now, this is more so a special teams guy, and the only reason I'm mentioning him is because the Giants had a top 30 visit. It's Tyrese Knight at a UTEP. They brought him in for a top 30 visit, and I watched his tape, and I came away actually pretty damn impressed with his eyes in the box. Now, there are times where he will be fooled, but like overall, sifting through traffic, dipping around, climbing offensive linemen, showing agility and short area quickness in doing so while keeping his eyes on the prize of running back the ball carrier. I felt like for a guy who's probably going to go in like the 6th round, it actually was pretty impressive. So Tyrese Knight is another name that I think Giant fans should be aware of because Giants are obviously interested in him to some degree. And I wanted to ask you one more question before we get out of here. We talked about the tight ends. I think Theo Johnson. I think Cade Stover is actually another one that I want to.
Wiley. Have you seen
Wiley. A little bit of him, more of an H-back, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
And then honestly, man, I watched a lot of Washington. I thought Devin Cope was pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't seen him at all.
So let's get into this before we leave. Spencer Rattler. What do we feel?
Yeah. So here's my thoughts on that. So Giants obviously brought in Spencer Rattler for a private visit. Spencer Rattler's falling on the board in the draft. Obviously, it could be available for the Giants either with their first pick at 107 or after that even maybe. I think it's a no. And I think the Giants are at the point here where they were either going to get Caleb Williams, Drake May, or no quarterback in this class. And why might they do that? Because look, yeah, there were some flaws in the tape, but when you consider all just the context and everything to it, the fact that Tommy DeVito developed that fast as a UDFA, they might be looking at it like we could draft a Rattler, or we kind of could try to keep developing DeVito. He already knows the system and he can keep working within the system. And that might be the better route because we get to keep the other draft pick and use it on another player who can help us win right now or develop right now, long-term or even short-term. So I think given the DeVito And let's be honest, we don't know how they feel about Drew Lock. There are things that we've heard. One thing that I know, again, some Giants fans think it's a lie or for whatever reason, but I know some Giants fans don't even believe that they tried to trade up for Drake May, despite Ian Rappaport saying it immediately on NFL Network, Albert Breer reporting it, Art Stapleton reporting it, Joe Shane saying in his post-draft presser that I tried trading back and up. It's just like just crazy to me. But what we've heard is that Seattle Seahawks GM John Schneider said Drew Lock signed with the Giants because they told him he's going to have a chance to compete. So I don't know if they even think that might be the case. And who knows if that's true or not true, but it's possibly true. And we know Drew Lock is going to get all the reps in spring OTAs, mandatory minicamp, potentially parts of training camp. So I think the Giants might just walk into the season with those three. Joe Shane's already told us he feels comfortable with those three. You develop DeVito, you maybe develop Lock, and maybe give him a chance to compete. And then Daniel Jones is your likely day one starter.
It just sucks because, okay, it's probably a worse room than it was last year because Tyrod's not here, right? But there's still that glimmer of hope, maybe that Drew Lock will take a step with Brian Daboll, because Drew Lock's tape last year wasn't bad with Seattle. He was still a little bit late with the football. He still could get a little bit reckless under pressure and just heave it up where he knows DK Metcalf was in the area. Yeah. But overall, when I did the evaluation on him when the Giants brought him in, I was like, this is a solid backup quarterback who, if Daniel Jones were to get hurt, he can come in and he could start. Or if it's actually a fair competition in training camp, which it probably won't be because one of them is making a lot more money than the other, it's not unfeasible that Drew Lock could usurp or unseat, I should probably say, Daniel Jones. I don't think that's a crazy thing. I think I would choose Daniel Jones if you're saying who's better. I think Daniel Jones is better than Drew Lock. I do.
Agreed.
But I don't think it's by a lot. And it's definitely not by the amount of money that each of those players are getting paid.
Yeah, I think you just nailed that entirely. And I don't think that's really even debatable, though I know some people might. I think you're spot on there. And I'll say this as far as Drew Lock goes, because I watched your film breakdown and I watched some of my own tape. And I remember I evaluated him in one game for the game he came back against the Eagles for CBS Sports for something we do. That was the best Drew Lock's ever looked in his career. Straight up. With the Seahawks, he took a massive jump than what he was with the Broncos. He has evolved as a player. That doesn't mean he's a great player now. And like you said, it doesn't mean he's better than Daniel Jones. I'd give the edge to Daniel Jones too. But I've also never seen Drew Lock in Brian Daboll's system. There could be potential for him to be the best version of himself within that system, which means he's an even better version of what he was then with the Seahawks, and which means that he could be, like you said, in a fair competition, potentially a guy who can compete. I know this for a fact, Nick. If the Giants are not winning games next year and the season goes the way it did last year and every year in the last 5 except for 2022, he'll be the starter. They're not going to keep trotting Jones out there at the end of next season if they're out of the playoffs with Jones's injury guarantee looming over them. It's going to be what happened with Russell Wilson. It's going to be what happened with Derek Carr. Those are facts that every Giants fan must face, even if you love Daniel Jones, and I respect that. Because once you're out of contention, you have to start thinking about the financials of the situation. So Drew Lock has a chance to play for the Giants next year, regardless of the situation. Or Daniel Jones is winning games for the Giants, and that's a good thing because we're finally winning football games, and we have another good season and something fun to talk about. So in that sense, like there's a lot going on at play there. But I think on the Rattler situation, just to bring it all back to that, Nick, I don't think it's happening. I think the Giants are moving forward with these three quarterbacks and giving DeVito a chance to develop in this system.
Well, Jake Andrews, thank you so much for the donation, says draft Rattler. And a large segment of fans are going to be clamoring on social media every week to start Rattler. It'll be so annoying.
Probably true.
Thanks, guys. Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Anytime Daniel Jones made a mistake, it would be fans saying, put Spencer Rattler in. Maybe rightfully so. Who knows?
Well, they're going to do that for Drew Lock anyway. So what's the difference?
Yeah, they might do that. Yeah. I mean, they were doing it for Tyrod to some degree. Yeah. Some of them. And Tyrod, when he had his opportunity, he balled out. My thing about Drew Lock, from what you were saying just a little bit before though, Dan, so what you're saying is the Giants going to be 2-10, fast track to the first overall pick. And then Drew Lock is going to come in and he's going to win 3 games. The Giants are going to pick it 6 and miss out on
I really don't want that to happen because it's just such a miserable season. It really is. It's tough to go through that for you guys as fans and for us as fans and then us as content creators and with this as our job. I can't do another one of those types of seasons. I think the Giants defense is going to be a lot better. We'll talk about this another time because it's not about this. But I do still have a glimmer of hope that Jones can bounce back and really. I don't know if I necessarily think he can take a big step, but at least play at the 2022 level, which can keep them competitive for the full year at least, and give them a chance at the wild card hopefully at the very least. Because like the season you're talking about, Nick, where they start 2-10 and then they win 3 or 4 games and get the 6th or 7th pick. It's so tired. I'm so tired of that crap at this point. I know you are too, and the whole
What
entire
do you
fan
mean?
base
We've
is.
just had it 9 out of the last 10
Yeah.
years. It's not that big of
It's
a
just
deal.
like such a disaster. It's just like there's no fun to it. You're rooting for the draft pick, kind of, but then you're also rooting for them to win the games when the games come. And then there's this whole debate with the fan base the entire time. Should we be rooting for the wins or should we not be rooting for the wins? The draft position, this and that. It's just like it's old and it's worn out. So I think no matter what happens, Nick, I think that's the last thing I want to happen for the next season with the Giants. So hopefully that's not the case.
I just want competitive football in December.
Yeah.
Competitive
That's what
football.
John Mara wants to. We'll see if we can get it. I'm a little bit hopeful again. We're gonna have to. I'm not ready to make any predictions yet. Let's wait for some more time. But
Yeah,
I like where the defense is headed. I really do.
Okay, before we get out of here, then, what else does the defense need? Because we've seen an emphasis on the defense after the Malik Neighbors. I could use another secondary piece. I could still use another corner. I wouldn't throw a fit at that. And then
use another wide 9 edge. I know you've been talking about that. I would like another rotational wide 9 edge. And then finally, interior defensive line, I still think is a really big need for the Giants, given what they lost in the offseason. And given, like you said on the last pod, how important they're going to be relying on that 4-man pass rush.
I want an upgrade over certain players that are on the roster still. Right. Like I want certain players that are on the roster who we all look at the roster and be like, yeah, he's probably going to make it. Like I'd like for those players to be pushed and to really earn that spot. Some of those guys are at the edge position too. Obviously not Azeez Ojulari. So that's why I'm like edge rusher. Could that be if you can get a really explosive edge rusher who can flatten at the top of the arc? I was bringing up Solomon before. There's a couple other guys. Maybe that could be another option, but who knows, man? It's exciting. I think the Giants so far, they're rebuilding this roster. They got the explosive weapon and they added to the secondary to help contain the weapons that they're going to be going up against.
Yeah, I wanted Jalix Hunt. I thought he was the perfect kind of guy for that wide 9 scheme and somebody to develop. But of course, the Eagles took him like 4 picks before the end of the 3rd round. It just exactly as expected. He'll work with Vic Fangio, and I'm sure he'll be a producer sooner than we expect because it's the Eagles and that's their luck. But times are changing for the Giants, revamping secondary. They added a lot of players that are talented in this class. They added 2 day 1 starters that are going to be 90% snap players in Malik Neighbors and Tyler Nubin. So really interesting start to the class. I also think it's funny, Nick, that 2 of the first players you watched tape on were Neighbors and Nubin, and 2 of the first players you at least, I mean, I don't know if those were the first you watched tape. Those first you told me about. 2 of like the first 5 names you said to put on the radar. So it ended up being 2 picks the Giants made.
Max Melton was the first guy I did an evaluation.
That was, and you did say that was one of the early ones I heard too. And I think they probably would have taken him too if he was on the board.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think they like Max Melton. One more. D-Kit, thank you so much again, buddy. Says, I can't help it, boys. I have to ask, what exactly are you expecting from Locke if he starts? Gotta know.
I think I'll answer the question this way, D-Kit. Let's wait because I want to watch Locke in minicamp. I want to watch Locke in OTAs, and I want to see if he gets those reps in training camp early when Jones is still recovering from his injury and working his way back. And then if I start to see that, then I can start to understand because I want to see how he processes Dable's defense, offense, how he sees it. Like, what are some of the throws he's making within this offense? Because we know he has, and I hate to say this, but more of a gunslinger mentality than the current version of Daniel Jones. Maybe not what he was 2019, but we're in 2024 now. We're a lot long removed from that. So he's going to process the different offense differently. Everyone has, right? Tommy DeVito was throwing outside the number hole shots that we didn't see at all from Daniel Jones in his career. Tyrod Taylor was throwing bombs all the time. 3-step, hit your back foot, throw the slot vert over and over again. So like every quarterback who's been within this system, the Dable system, has processed it and seen it differently. So for me to answer that question, I'd like to see how Locke envisions and sees the system.
I think that was a really good answer, Dan.
Okay, that's a good thing to end on then. So on that note, thank you to everybody tuning in to day 2 coverage of Big Blue Banter Giants Draft. As always, we appreciate your support. The following of the show, hit the like button, subscribe. If you're on iTunes, make sure you download. I couldn't find a Giant shirt tonight. They're all in the wash, and I have laundry to do. But let's be honest, draft weekend is not a time where I'm doing laundry.
It's a lot.
I have Giant shirts.
Yeah, he was. When was he wearing them though?
I remember that there's a good Giant shirt that I wear. We're going to look back on pods. I have a very cool Giant shirt that I bought for like $55 on Fanatics. It's like nice. It's like one of those like nice ones.
It's expensive.
Yeah, it's way too expensive, but it's nice. It's one of those dry fit ones. This is like a dry fit shirt. I wore a blue shirt tonight. This is Giants blue, at the very least, that I'm wearing. But
You didn't even have to acknowledge it. I actually was going to bring it up at the top of the show, and I said, "Oh, he's wearing Giants blue, so it's
Yeah, we're in
it's probably a
Giants blue.
Giants blue."
And
I
of
don't
course,
even
like,
have that. I'm telling you,
I thought I had my Giants sweatshirt, but that's also in the hamper. Like, no one's doing laundry during draft weekend. There's no time for this. This is a non-draft weekend kind of chore to do. So it is what it is. We got the Giants pillow in the background. We got the all-time greats cards up there. We got some Giants paraphernalia. But for now, I'll wear another blue shirt tomorrow. And paraphernalia, not the right word, or there was something else like paraphernalia.
Oh, I didn't know if you had a apparatus that you used to
Oh,
smoke
no.
the boubange out of that had a Giants logo.
No. I should get a Giants logo, one of those. That'd be a good thing to have. Oh, no, I don't use that stuff. Never mind. Anyway, have a great rest of your night. We'll talk to you soon. Coverage coming back tomorrow, Saturday, after the draft concludes. We'll be talking day 3 picks and overall thoughts, probably, or just on the class. But I do like doing the day to let it marinate. So Sunday is going to be kind of like our 30,000 foot view thoughts on the class too, as well. So more coverage. Keep it locked and loaded. Have a great rest of your night and weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.